Okay, so of course the big news today was, or the big news this week has been Barack Obama's preacher and the so-called hate speeches that he has been giving. It's hard. Okay, so I've listened to the speeches. Number one, I've listened to a couple speeches. At least I've listened to what is on Savage's webpage, and I assume, knowing Savage's character, that he would try to get the creme de la creme of hatred. And what I heard on that broadcast was nothing but more or less factual information. Yes, he said it in a passionate way, and yes, there was a degree of anger. But what he said was that Jesus was a black man living in Rome that was ruled by Europeans, white Europeans. Well, whether he was a black man like a, Nubian black is questionable, but he was most likely darker than his European occupiers. That is true. He was a Semitic. So, that's more or less true. A bit exaggerated, but true. And then he goes on to talk about how basically Giuliani and McCain and Hillary Clinton fit the mold of American power as far as race is concerned, which is in no way questionable. I mean, I don't understand what the big question is about what he said. I understand that he was mad, but you know what? If he wasn't mad, I would wonder if he had a pulse. I mean, if you consider black history and black history's relationship with America, I don't see how it is possible to not believe that they're justified in being angry. I mean, anger is something that cannot continue forever, obviously. We don't want to necessarily encourage anger. But at the same time, I cannot help but understand exactly what he's saying. I mean, yeah, I'd be pissed off too. If I was taken from my family and I was put into the bottom of a boat for 3 weeks in some of the most hellacious circumstances that you can imagine, seeing the women of my tribe raped while I was fed moldy oatmeal and allowed to puke over myself, shit myself, piss myself, and then brought over here and my people spent 200 or 300 years enslaved, I would be angry. I think I would be beyond angry. So I don't really understand the surprise there. Now, granted, if you consider the Civil War and the amount of bloodshed that whites spilled in the name of ending slavery, I believe that there was a really monumental amount of atonement for what occurred. But even since that time, there have been atrocities and lynchings and racism and violations to justice committed that demand anger. They demand anger. So I don't really know why we are somehow surprised that a black preacher in Chicago gets up there and talks about the situation that Barack is in. That Hillary Clinton and Rudy Giuliani do fit the mold. They do. Every president of the United States has been white. There's no question about that. There's no question about what was said, at least in that speech. I don't see it being hatred of America. I do see it being anger, in some respects, regarding white privilege. Which for me is, as I've tried to say here, somewhat understandable. I don't know how devoid of empathy a person could be to not understand the anger that African Americans hold, or at least to understand that they are angry and that they are justifiably angry. So, this preacher gets up there in Chicago, he vents that anger. His people probably like the fact that he voices their frustrations and their anger if not their outrage. And you know, Barack did a brave thing, I think, in saying that I don't like the tone, that basically what the preacher was doing was not necessarily healing the rift that is here in America. But at the same time, I'm not going to denounce him as a preacher. I still stand behind Barack. And I quite honestly think that this thing is being whipped up into a frenzy. Now, maybe there's some statements that I've missed. And I'm sure that this man has said things that I would disagree with vehemently. But at the same time, I bet you that there have been things said in every circle of power that I strongly disagree with.